No one in Port Charles expected the night to spiral into chaos this fast. Because what began as quiet conversations suddenly turned into shocking confessions, dangerous plans, and a moment that could destroy the fragile balance between several powerful families. And it all started with something no one saw coming. Olivia Quartermaine opened a door and walked straight into a scene she never wanted to see. But that wasn't the only secret exploding across Port Charles. Because somewhere else in town, Jason Morgan was preparing to disappear. And before he left, someone might have to die. At Alexis Davis' house, the evening started gently, almost peacefully. Molly Lansing Davis sat on the couch, staring at the floor, her thoughts heavy and impossible to escape. She had been carrying something inside her heart for weeks. Something painful. Something final. Then the doorbell rang. When Molly opened the door, she was surprised to see Cody Bell standing there with a warm smile and a large gift basket in his hands. Inside were chocolates, tea, and a few small things meant to brighten her day. But the moment Molly saw it, her heart sank, because Cody had no idea what she was about to tell him. He stepped inside, placing the basket on the table. His voice was soft. He said he just wanted to help her feel a little better. But Molly's eyes began to fill with tears, because this kindness made what she had to say even harder. For a long moment the room stayed silent. And then finally Molly took a breath. Her voice trembled as she told Cody the truth. Doctors had confirmed it. She couldn't have children. Not now. Maybe not ever. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Cody froze. But Molly wasn't finished. She told him something even more shocking. She didn't want children through adoption either. And surrogacy wasn't something she wanted. She had thought about it carefully. And deep down, she knew that path wasn't right for her. For a moment Cody said nothing. The silence felt endless. And Molly braced herself for disappointment. For sadness. Maybe even for Cody to walk away. But then Cody slowly stepped closer. His voice was steady. He told Molly something she never expected to hear. He said she was enough. Just her. No conditions. No expectations. No what-ifs. Molly looked up at him, stunned. She searched his face for hesitation. For doubt. But there was none. And suddenly, the emotional wall she had built began to crumble. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Because for the first time since hearing the news, she didn't feel broken. She felt loved. Overwhelmed by emotion, Molly leaned forward and kissed him. A quiet, heartfelt kiss. And in that moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. But across town, another story was unfolding. And this one was far more dangerous. At the Quartermaine gatehouse, the fire crackled softly in the fireplace. Michael Corinthos sat across from Jacinda Bracken, listening carefully as she spoke. Jacinda's voice carried the weight of years of regret. She told Michael that when she saw Charlotte Cassadine, she recognized something painfully familiar. Because Charlotte reminded her of herself. A girl whose life had taken a dark turn far too early. Jacinda admitted that when she was Charlotte's age, she had fallen deeply in love. The man was 10 years older. To her it felt like destiny. But to her parents, it felt like disaster. They cut her off completely. No support. No contact. No forgiveness. Suddenly alone in the world, Jacinda moved in with her boyfriend. She worked every job she could find. Cleaning. Serving tables. Anything that paid enough to survive. But life kept getting harder. Bills piled up. Opportunities disappeared. And eventually, Jacinda made a choice she never imagined she would. She became an escort. The words came out quietly, almost like a confession. Michael listened without interrupting. There was no judgment in his eyes. Only compassion. He gently told Jacinda something she desperately needed to hear. She had nothing to be ashamed of. Life had put her in impossible situations. And she had survived. For the first time all night, Jacinda smiled. The tension between them shifted. The firelight danced across the room. Their conversation softened. Their voices lowered. And slowly, the emotional connection between them turned into something more intimate. They stood closer. Closer still. Until finally, their lips met. Moments later, clothes were forgotten, and passion took over. But just when the moment reached its peak, the door suddenly opened. Olivia Quartermaine stood frozen in the doorway. Her eyes widened in pure shock. Because right in front of her, Michael and Jacinda stood completely naked beside the fire. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then chaos exploded. Michael and Jacinda scrambled for their clothes, trying desperately to cover themselves. Olivia turned away, horrified. She hadn't come here for this. She had only been looking for Leah Quartermaine's retainer. But instead, she had just walked into a scene she could never unsee. When Michael finally pulled on a shirt, he tried to explain. But Olivia wasn't amused. Not even a little. She reminded him that Leo could have walked in. Or worse, Wiley. That thought alone made her shudder. Michael awkwardly joked that next time they'd remember to lock the door. But Olivia's expression hardened instantly. That wasn't funny. Not even close. She told Michael he needed to seriously think about what almost happened today. Because the consequences could have been far worse than embarrassment. And judging by the tension in the room, this conversation was far from over. But while Olivia confronted Michael's, another explosive conflict was brewing at City Hall. And it involved helicopters, zoning laws, and accusations of corruption. And if the truth came out, Port Charles politics might never be the same again. Inside Laura Collins' office, frustration was already in the air. Laura sat behind her desk, glaring at Ezra Boyle. She had just learned about a public notice he had quietly posted. A zoning ordinance change involving Gents Sidwell's helicopters. If no one complained in the next few days, the ordinance would automatically pass. Laura wasn't happy about the secrecy. But Ezra defended himself. He insisted he had gotten involved with Sidwell before realizing how complicated the situation truly was. Just then the office door burst open. Martin Gray walked in. And right behind him came Tracy Quartermaine. Covered in dirt. Her clothes were dusty. Her hair was a mess. And her temper was blazing. She had just taken a nasty fall from her horse. And she knew exactly why. A helicopter connected to Sidwell's company had flown too low and spooked the horse. Tracy was furious. And when she learned about the zoning ordinance, her anger exploded. She accused Laura of taking a bribe from Sidwell. The room went silent. Martin quickly jumped to Laura's defense. But Tracy wasn't backing down. She announced that she would contact a judge she knew personally. And she would file an injunction to stop the ordinance immediately. Martin warned her that it probably wouldn't work. But Tracy only smiled. Because if there was one thing she loved, it was a fight. And she wasn't about to lose this one. However, Ezra looked deeply uneasy. Because if Sidwell's plans were ruined, there would be consequences. Serious consequences. And Laura was quickly running out of patience with Sidwell's demands. But while Port Charles politics heated up, an even more dangerous conversation was happening somewhere else. A conversation about murder. And Jason Morgan was right in the center of it. At Sonny Corintho's house, the mood was heavy but calm. Jason stood across from Sonny, explaining his plan. He was leaving town. Soon, he would disappear with Britt Westbourne. They would hide while Brick worked to recreate the medication Britt desperately needed. But Jason had unfinished business. One last problem to solve. Ross Cullum. Jason intended to erase him permanently. And if necessary, he might frame WSB agent Jack Brennan for it. Sonny listened carefully. Then he gave Jason a warning. If Jason made this move, it had to be perfect. Because if he got caught killing a WSB agent, he would never see freedom again. Jason understood the risk, but he was willing to take it. He told Sonny he might be gone for a month, maybe 2, however long it took to replicate Britt's medicine. For a moment, the dangerous plans faded away, and 2 old friends shared a quiet understanding. They had survived wars together, loss, betrayal, and no matter what happened next, they would always have each other's backs. But as emotional as that moment was, another secret was about to surface. And this one involved a pregnancy test, a hidden truth, and a decision that could change several lives forever. Meanwhile, Stella Henry had just discovered something shocking. Inside Jordan Ashford's purse, she had found a pregnancy test. But instead of telling Curtis immediately, Stella kept the secret. She wanted answers first. And the longer she thought about it, the more questions she had. Because if Jordan was pregnant, everything in Port Charles was about to change. And when Stella finally confronted Jordan, the truth might be more complicated than anyone imagined. But what Jordan was about to reveal could shake Curtis to his core. And the answer to that pregnancy test might change everything. Across Port Charles, tension was building quietly. Secrets were being buried. Decisions were being delayed. And one hidden truth was about to explode. Because Stella Henry had just discovered something that could change everything. A pregnancy test. And it belonged to Jordan Ashford. Stella sat alone for a long moment after finding it. Her mind raced with questions. Jordan had said nothing to Curtis. Nothing to anyone. And that silence worried Stella. Because if Jordan truly believed she might be pregnant, waiting could only make things harder. Still, Stella didn't want to cause chaos without knowing the truth. So instead of telling Curtis immediately, she decided to confront Jordan herself. But while Stella prepared for that conversation, another tense exchange was unfolding across town. At a quiet nail salon, Portia Robinson sat across from Jordan. The atmosphere between them was already thick with tension. Portia had heard enough rumors to know something was wrong. And when she realized Jordan hadn't told Curtis about the pregnancy possibility, Portia's patience disappeared. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. She called Jordan out. Portia reminded her that Jordan had once exposed Portia's own pregnancy news to Curtis before Portia was ready to share it. And now Jordan was hiding something even bigger. Jordan's expression hardened. But she didn't deny it. Instead, she simply said she wasn't going to repeat that mistake. She wouldn't reveal something so personal before she knew the truth. Portia crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed. But deep down, she understood something else might be happening. Maybe Jordan hadn't told Curtis because she didn't plan to keep the baby. The thought lingered in the air. Heavy, uncomfortable. Jordan didn't respond. She simply stood up and walked out, leaving Portia alone with 100 unanswered questions. Later that night, Portia met Isaiah Gannon at General Hospital. She filled him in on everything. The hidden pregnancy test, Jordan's silence, Curtis being left completely in the dark. Isaiah listened carefully. Then he asked the question no one else had dared to say out loud. What if Jordan wasn't telling Curtis because she wasn't planning to keep the baby? Portia paused, because the more she thought about it, the more that possibility made sense. But if that was true, the fallout could be enormous. Because Curtis deserved to know, didn't he? Meanwhile, Curtis Ashford had no idea any of this was happening. He sat in his apartment when there was a knock at the door. It was Trina Robinson. His daughter stepped inside, smiling warmly. Curtis had news to share. He told Trina he was planning to move into Jordan's apartment. It was a big change. But Trina surprised him. She supported the decision. Still, there was a small flicker of emotion behind her eyes. Because Trina also knew something else was coming. Her father was about to have a new baby with Portia. And even though she loved both of them, a tiny part of her felt jealous. Curtis immediately sensed it. So he gently reassured her. His voice was soft. He told Trina something every daughter needs to hear. His heart had more than enough room. Enough love for both of his children. Trina smiled, but even she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening behind the scenes. Something no one had told Curtis yet. And finally, the moment Stella had been waiting for arrived. At General Hospital, Stella asked Jordan to meet her. Jordan walked in cautiously. But the second she saw Stella's serious expression, she knew something was wrong. Stella didn't waste time. She revealed everything. She had accidentally found the pregnancy test in Jordan's purse. Jordan froze. For a second, she looked like she might deny it. But then she sighed. And the truth came out. Yes, she had bought the test. But she hadn't taken it yet. Jordan admitted she had been avoiding it. Because she didn't know what she wanted the answer to be. If she was pregnant, her entire life would change. Her career, her relationship with Curtis, her future, everything. And the truth was, she wasn't even sure she wanted to keep the baby. The words hung in the air. Stella's eyes widened. She stepped closer, her voice firm. Waiting wouldn't solve anything. In fact, it would only make the decision harder. Jordan knew Stella was right. So finally, she did something she had been avoiding for days. She went to the pharmacy, bought another pregnancy test, and took it. Minutes later, Jordan walked back into the hospital hallway where Stella was waiting. The tension was unbearable. Stella immediately asked the question, "What were the results?" Jordan looked at her, silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. And then, Jordan finally spoke. But before Stella could react, another storm was already brewing across Port Charles. Because while Jordan faced life-changing news, Jason Morgan was preparing to leave town. And his plan involved something far darker. Back at Sonny Corintho's house, Jason finished explaining his plan. He would disappear with Britt Westbourne, hide somewhere far from Port Charles, and wait while Britt recreated the medication Britt needed to survive. But Jason still had one dangerous problem left behind. Ross Cullum, a threat that had to be removed. Permanently. Jason had already thought about every detail. And if necessary, he would frame WSB agent Jack Brennan. Sonny listened carefully, his face serious, because he knew exactly how dangerous that plan was. Taking down a WSB agent could trigger consequences Jason couldn't escape. If Jason got caught, he wouldn't just go to prison. He would disappear forever. Sonny's warning was simple. If Jason did this, it had to be flawless. No mistakes. No loose ends. Jason nodded. He understood the risk. But Britt's life mattered more than anything. And Jason was willing to risk everything to save her. The two men stood there for a long moment. Not as mob boss and enforcer, but as brothers. Friends who had survived countless battles together. No matter what happened next, their loyalty would never change. But across Port Charles, danger, secrets, and emotional choices were piling up everywhere. Olivia was still furious with Michael. Tracy was preparing legal war against Sidwell. Laura was losing patience with political pressure. Jordan faced a life-changing decision. And Jason Morgan was about to step into the shadows once again. In Port Charles, nothing stays quiet for long. And these secrets, they won't stay hidden forever. But here's the question that could change everything. If Jordan really is pregnant, should she tell Curtis immediately? Or does she have the right to decide first what she wants to do? Because if Curtis finds out the truth from someone else, the fallout could be explosive. And when Jason makes his move against Ross Cullum, will he succeed? Or will the WSB finally catch him? Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you trust Jason's plan? And what would you do if you were Jordan's? And if you enjoy daily General Hospital spoilers, recaps, and predictions, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next Port Charles shock. Because trust me, the drama is only getting started.